So do you see my Zoom windows as well?
Do we see your full screen?
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So so going to be sort of a general overview of Our.Sci and then some of the sort of technical components of the Our.Sci platform, and then some of the specific things that we've worked on in the context of OpenTeam over the last 6 months, and how those might relate to other team members. So Our.Sci, we have a very straightforward mission. We want to support communities who want to do real science. That can be communities of professionals, that can be communities of citizen scientists or non-professionals. We're kind of open. So how do we do that? Our goal is to make it easy to, one, build and create experiments or data collection activities. Two, collect data, so run those experiments. And three, share insights and results. So learn from those experiments or activities. And that's really our core function. It feels a little vague, and I think the best way to describe what we do is to just provide an example. So, Manuel, if you could go to.
Should we start with the mobile app?
No, I just want to talk about the BFA as a good example of someone that we worked with and what their goals are and how we've helped connect to that. So, if you could go to. So the Bionutrient Food Association is one of our main clients, and they're kind of a good example community. So they're an 800-member nonprofit. They have a pretty big, like 10,000 plus web-based following and email list. And they're a bunch of growers, gardeners, professional farmers, foodies, activists, and some academics. And they're really interested in understanding the connection between soil, food, and human health. And as a community, they've been around for about 8 years. They have conferences every year. They have a lot of built up anecdotal knowledge and information that they've shared. And we basically help them try to convert some of that anecdotal information into information that was more sort of scientifically based, or that at least had a path for becoming scientifically based, with the hope that once you do that, then the concepts are scalable, right? You can't scale anecdotes very well, but you can scale results. So how do we help them? We help them build experiments. If you go to realfoodcampaign.org and you go up to the menu, you can see our work. You can see the 2 surveys. We actually created a large national survey where we collected carrots and spinach in the field, and this year we're collecting 6 different types of produce to measure in the lab food quality and also soil quality using a kind of a simplified set of tests that are relatively low cost. So we helped them build out that survey. And in terms of the technical piece, the tools that we helped them do that with was tools from an organization called Open Data Kit, which is they're focused on building mobile data collection apps, survey type apps, and they have a standard for doing that. And so we use their tool. You may have to log in here, Manuel, but which is Open Data Kit Build, which is really neat, and it allows you to build pretty complex forms that have if-then functionality and a lot of other functionality you would expect in a form builder that's all open source. So this was nice for us because it was relatively low effort. And if you log in and pick like a form like sample intake, you can do text input, multiple choice, GPS location selection, all that kind of stuff. So we helped them build out experiments, and we provided sort of a platform that's open source to be able to design those experiments so that lots of people could use them. So yeah, just pick anything so you get a sense of kind of what that looks like. That's fine.
I want something nice.
All right.
Well,
any of those towards the top are good. I mean, they're
towards the top. Okay.
Yeah, they're all good. Sure.
Let's open wet chemistry.
So this is an example form that it's actually, this is quite a small one. I think our longest form has 180 questions and a whole bunch of if-then statements and dependencies. So you can make very complex forms. This one's very short because the whole goal of this is to do one wet chemistry operation. So you want to be able to do this quickly and efficiently. And this is lab-based. So what's cool, again, when we built out these experiments with the BFA, they need data collected in the field. They need data collected in the lab. They need data collected from other sources, and we're able to pull that all into one place using the same kind of tools. So we helped them build the experiment. And then we also helped them collect the data. So as you can see, we have a mobile app for collecting the data. And that mobile app is just an implementation of those surveys that we built. So you can see, yeah, go ahead and start a survey. Yep. We'll show that a little bit later, but you can see that you can like select an organization, and that helps filter down the surveys to the ones that are relevant to you. But if you just click on a survey, like a farm partner survey, planting form or something like that, that's not a bad one. So this was a survey that actually farmers took this year to collect data about their farm. So this includes their field ID, and then we ask them questions about how much mulch they use and all kinds of stuff. And later, in about 10 minutes, I'll talk to you about how that actually connects to Farm OS and what else that does. But this is just an example of the form. In fact, in the case of the BFA, we didn't just use our app. We actually built them a white labeled app so that it has their, their background and their colors and their logo, and it only shows the forms that are relevant to them. And we also built them a tool. So that was a reflectometer, which helps to collect some of that data. And in the long term, we're trying to build out a correlation so that we can predict food quality in the field. So this is the app that we built for them. But what's cool is that it didn't take a lot of effort to build this app because it's all built on the same kind of platform using the same structure. And then finally, we helped them like share insights. So we generated a final report. So sort of did that technical work, but we also created dashboards so that they could sort of in real time visualize the data that we had collected. Not only visualize it, but in the same way that if you were working in R or in Python, you're taking data from multiple locations. We had a whole bunch of surveys. You had to combine them together. You had to clean that data. So all of that is happening in the background here, actually in JavaScript. So it's really as if you wrote like what you would normally write in Python or R in JavaScript. And so it's all real-time updated and provided and cross-platform. It takes a minute because it's a decent amount of data to manage. So that's like a good example, the Bionutrient Food Association, trying to help them really achieve their goals by supporting building experiments, collecting data, and sharing insights. And then we've built sort of a tool chain to help make that work. I think the things that are unique about what we do, because obviously there's a lot of data collection platforms out there. The unique thing about what we do is all of our data collection is point-based. So we're not really doing like, put a temperature sensor in the corner of the room and let it go for a year. Everything that we do is, a person on the ground collecting data from a point. And that usually means that there's an example of the visualization, for example. You can scroll down and see graph stuff, and you can download the CSV and all kinds of other stuff there. So, so as I was saying, a human being is collecting data from a specific location. So that means they need survey data, thus the survey builder tool that we showed you before. But they also need data from tools. So data, for example, from our reflectometer that's collected over USB or Bluetooth serial. So we can do that as well and pull it into the same structure. But also data coming from APIs and other sources. And we can do that as well and pull it into the same structure. And so Manuel's just showing an example of being able to connect to a device using the app.
Unfortunately, I don't have my device here.
That's all right. It's okay. I had this all nicely set up before we started, but that's okay. So really flexible point-based data collection. And that flexibility comes from the fact that we've made a neat development environment that allows you to use JavaScript to do kind of whatever you want. So our strategy here was that we felt if a user could code in JavaScript even a little bit, they should be able to do anything from, if you want to pull up your development environment, and we'll just sort of show them what that looks like. And maybe if you have a dashboard or a measurement script that you could show you could visualize there.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea is if you can code a little bit in JavaScript, you should be able to connect to a device, receive information from a device, do math to that, use anything that's available in JavaScript libraries via NPM. If you're not familiar with JavaScript, NPM is a package manager for JavaScript. I think especially if you haven't looked at JavaScript in a long time, you might think, well, I can't do what I need to do in JavaScript, and I would challenge you to find something that you can't do in JavaScript. It's pretty amazing. You can do convolutional neural networks. You can do pretty complex statistics. You can do great visualizations. Most of the better libraries now come out cross-platform and include JavaScript as one of the things that they develop libraries around. So it's pretty flexible. And you can access all of those things in a script. And that means that you can take that script and put it anywhere in your survey and do things like error check, right? So maybe I'm in the field and I collect 5 pieces of information, and I want to make sure that those 5 pieces of information are correct. You know, a simple thing to do is say, hey, you know, is this piece of information within the range? Is it between 0 and 1? And say, if it's not, then tell the user. But much more often, and what we see with our collaborators is it's not that simple. It's actually much, much, much more complicated. It's asking, you know, do these 5 things match up? And let me go check the weather and see if it relates to that, and then provide some feedback to the user. So by giving people access to JavaScript and NPM libraries, it allows them to error check and confirm and increase quality in the field in a way that is just almost impossible otherwise. And we have a nice little development environment for doing that. And we have a long-term plan for making that, I think, easier and better. So flexibility is something that I think is unique. Comparability is something that we're pushing towards, we're constantly thinking about, but is a process. So our goal is to make the comparable thing the easy thing. So make a new user who's coming in, the simplest thing for them to do is to use the same method and process as someone who's already there. So that instead of having to have individual relationships to build large comparable data sets, we can build those data sets sort of naturally by making the comparable way the easy way. And that's really sort of just a design perspective more than anything else, but it's something that we try to focus on. And then finally, of course, that it's all open source. If you look at the other survey tools outside of Open Data Kit, they are not open source. So in the context of Open Team, we the primary thing that we do is we actually manage a sub-project with an Open Team called the Research Farm Roadmap. And the goal of the Research Farm Roadmap is to make every farm a research farm, and every farmer a researcher to the degree that they want to be. So that project is really focused on making a coherent data collection process and increasing comparability across spaces so that individual users can be comparable without a lot of effort. So, for example, we're working with Michigan State University in Malawi. They have, I don't know, many farms, smallholder farms that they're collecting survey data from, household data from, so they have a wide range of data collection types. So we built their survey collection system, provided error checking and visualization, and then we also connected to FarmOS and pushed the data that we collected back to FarmOS to a consolidated FarmOS instance for the entire project. We're working with EcoCycle. They're doing a citizen science project with 250 volunteers in the city of Boulder, where they're comparing management on people's lawns, actually, to see if they can increase soil carbon on people's lawns. So they're using our data collection platform to do that comparison over the course of several years, and we're also doing the soil sampling for them. Coming up, we're going to be working with Quick Carbon and Rise of Terra, which is Joe Clapperton, as well as the city of Boulder, to create a very, very simple user interface for collecting soil samples for in-field carbon estimation using a reflectometer. I'm really excited about that project as well. So these are just a couple of examples of the projects within the Research Farm Roadmap. So that's like kind of our community partners. So in terms of, I'd like to spend the next 10 minutes really focusing on the technical collaborations we've done so far, because we've actually been working on Open Team goals since January. So in that time, most of our work has been with FarmOS, and specifically in the context of the two projects, one with General Mills, collecting data from about 65 or 70 farms in Canada, and with the Bionutrient Food Association, collecting data from about 35 farms all around the US. And our goal was to do two things. One, each of those projects had their own data collection needs. So they wanted to know about farm management. They were also collecting samples, like soil samples, tissue samples. And so they needed that data to connect with lab data. So they had their own sort of, survey needs, research needs. But in addition, we wanted to push the management data to individual FarmOS instances, which were controlled and owned by the farmer. And this is really our long-term vision, is that the long-term storage of information should be controlled by the farmer. But because each farm is so different, how do we achieve comparability? We do that by controlling the intake. So on the intake side, which is like using our app, we can control to make sure that these 100 farmers are answering the same questions the same way, they have the same options, so that when we analyze the data later, we have something we can analyze, right? But we control that through the intake. We don't control it by setting up a FarmOS instance so that you have no other option except those options, because that becomes restrictive for everybody else. So that's kind of our long-term strategy. And we were able to do that this year. So we actually created, if you want to look up some of the planting survey that you saw before, our weekly surveys, those are surveys that farmers filled out. The results of those surveys, which is management data mostly, when did you water, how much did you water, did you add fertilizer, what kind of seeds did you use? The results of those went to the Our.Sci database, but they also got pushed to the individual FarmOS instances controlled by that farmer. And they were able to log into their FarmOS instance from the Our.Sci app, meaning they had one consistent user experience, and then the data was pushed from there. So we learned a lot of lessons here. Not everything worked perfectly. There was important things I think that we missed at the beginning that caused comparability to be harder. But actually we're fixing those things now towards the end of the year, and I feel like we're in pretty good shape. The core concept was good. So I'm excited about that. Longer term with FarmOS, which is stuff that we're working on like right now, we're trying to build out like a common survey building tool, because we have a nice survey building tool, as you saw. We want to make it better. We want to make one that integrates the scripting and stuff in a more effective way. And that's something that I think is useful for FarmOS to be able to provide specific farm types a more efficient data collection experience. So we have a really nice overlap in that. So we're going to be working on building a common survey building tool that has that JavaScript scripting integrated, so that they can do that for pure PharmOS users. We can do it for pure Our.Sci users, and we can do it for users who are using Our.Sci to also push to PharmOS, which is great. And I think that's a key point, is we really want to, we can't try to, we have to do both. We have to both bring users to where the data is and bring data to where the users are. Yeah, I guess, I don't know, I can't express that enough. I think none of us really want to do either. Some of us want to do one but not the other. But what we really need to do for true interoperability is do both. I have to be able to bring data to PharmOS in a useful way. PharmOS has to be able to bring data to me in a useful way, because users enter, and they're going to enter this open ecosystem from different places. So I think that's a really key point, and again, it's part of what we're pushing towards being able to do. So long-term with PharmOS, common survey builder, and then having Our.Sci be a PharmOS aggregator, so that Our.Sci sort of administrative controls, if you have a group, for example, on Our.Sci, you can control a large number of users, or you can apply access controls to users. Being able to have PharmOS an aggregator system, so that administrative control can apply to a large number of farms. So for example, if I wanted to ask a question and say, hey, let's compare these 100 farms across yield, right? I have to be able to go ask those 100 PharmOS instances, because they're controlled by the farmer as they should be, hey, can I get your yield data? That becomes really complicated with 100 separate logins. So, Mike and the PharmOS team has been building an aggregator tool that allows us to sort of manage those logins and manage that interaction in a way that makes more sense, so that at the administrative level within Our.Sci, if you have an organization, you can have a big bucket of farms who say, yes, it's okay to access my data, or it's okay to push to my PharmOS instance. So that's another thing. And then finally, our very long term is creating something like that's more like a digital, call it a digital coffee shop, but a space where a large number of farmers who control their data come to a common space, share a common level of data, and are able to then visualize for themselves and interpret for themselves other people in that shared space. In the same way that you walk into a coffee shop, you sit down at a table and you start asking your neighbor, how they're doing and what their yields were. It's like that, but data enabled. And I think that's our long-term goal, and there's a lot to get there, but I think we're pushing in the right direction. So, yeah, I'll stop there.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I think you sort of hit on it, but could you just maybe be a little bit more explicit about the boundaries between the Android app and the web form, the sort of the progression to web forms, and how that fits with sort of the PharmOS forms? And we'll get a little bit from the PharmOS side this afternoon, but I think it might be useful to just talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. So click on a weekly management form. And if you go to the top level, so you can see all the questions.
Just a sec. I'll use the Our.Sci application.
So, when you fill this out, if you go to the top level, see all the questions, let's say. Well, sure, let's start there. So how does the technical collaboration work? So here's a starting point. Can you go to your user? Yeah, sure. So first off, Manuel has a PharmOS account that's connected. You can see the test.pharmos.net. And if you click on that, he actually has multiple connected accounts. And those just all have logins to his individual PharmOS account, or various ones. So when he selects those, what it does is it actually goes and asks that PharmOS instance, hey, give me all your fields, so we can see what their list of fields is, and also give me all the plantings in those fields, so we can see what was planted there. So now when he goes back to the weekly survey, no, you're good. Yeah, right there, it's good. The weekly survey is good.
Yeah, I'll just start a new one.
Start from the beginning, sure. So in this question, the first question is, what planting are you filling this out for? Well, we just got the planting information from this individual PharmOS instance, and so now we can provide the planting detail. This is one of the areas where we learned lessons just about usability. What should people see? What are they going to remember? What's the computer readable, and then what's the human readable version of this? But so he picked a planting. So then he would hit next. He would say, hey, what are you submitting this survey for? Here's an example of something that if you were doing this in PharmOS, you would have to do this manually. But the way people think about submitting data, and when they actually realistically do it, is not necessarily the week it happens or the minute it happens. You have to. This is like we're trying to be more conscious about what the user actually wants and what their experience should be. So you say, oh, this was actually for 3 weeks ago. I'm going to give you some information for that. And then you would say, what did you do? If you did multiple things, then so this has an if-then statement. So it would follow you through the weed control and the pest disease control options. And then it would go through the weed control options. And there's ifs-then statements here too, and all kinds of stuff. So you can fill this all out. Sure, do some observed pests. I think there's well, whatever. In here somewhere, there's another drop down, which is kind of cool. We actually pull from a CSV on a common GitHub for variety. Here it is. So what pest or disease? So this list of pests and disease is pulled from the web, and we just put it on a common CSV in a Git library, which I like because then if somebody else wants to use it, it's there and available. And we do this for other things. We do it for varieties. We do it for pests. We do it for tillage types, which is how we get comparable tillage types to what's used by other PharmOS users in terms of the stir score and other things like that. So, again, trying to improve that comparability. So if you go all the way to the end, there you go. So it says now submit data to PharmOS.
I'm not sure I have a valid configuration.
No, don't do it. Yeah, don't do it. Whatever. But if you hit submit, it would. I think what's unique here is we didn't ask the questions in the way that PharmOS would ask them, or in the order that PharmOS would necessarily ask them, or that you would know to ask them. We did it on a way that we felt like our user base or the people we're interacting with expected to see it. So what this script, oh cool, it did work. So what this script is doing is it's taking that and then it's putting it into the buckets in PharmOS where they're actually supposed to be, which required a crap ton of scripting. But because we have that kind of flexible structure, it allowed us to do it. So it means that if somebody else was on a research project and they were collecting their big pile of data that was, potentially variable and unique, and they had their own unique sample collection process, which as you work with more and more research practices, you realize everybody's doing it differently, which is fine. But if we want to use a common platform for storage, which respects that farmers should control their data, then we've got to get that converted into something that's going to work. And that's what the scripting allows us to do. So we just pushed to PharmOS. If we went to PharmOS, we would see that all that data is then there. And then we also, in the end, if you hit send, that would push it to Our.Sci, so it would get stored in this existing format. We certainly don't have to push it to Our.Sci, and we don't have to push it to PharmOS. We just have the flexibility to do both. And in fact, we would really love in the future to be able to do this with other platforms. So we would love to be able to do this with LandPKS, or we would love to be able to do this with other things like OpenLandMap or other things where we might be able to push data and improve comparability from different places. So that's an example of the collaboration that we worked on with PharmOS. So yeah, I guess I've probably talked enough. We have other work that we've done. I think the stuff with Quick Carbon is going to be really, really neat. I'm really excited about that, but we don't have a lot of like active working stuff yet. We're just getting started on it. But yeah, hopefully that gives you a sense of what we do and what we've done and where we're going next.
Greg, we have about 10 minutes before 2. You be up for answering some questions from participants?
Sure.
I'm sure there are some. Everybody's on mute at the moment, but please speak up.
Yeah, sorry about the technical glitches also. It's kind of frustrating.
No questions yet. I just wanted to say it's fascinating and exciting and really interesting and just Yeah, this is Daniela. I don't have a particular question, but I wanted, in the webinar, it's so hard because everybody's quiet. It's really interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, Greg, thanks. This is Jeff Herrick. That was great, fascinating, and really great work. Can you talk a little bit more about, I understand how PharmOS is managing data privacy.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit more about how you're managing data privacy for users who use your apps? In other words, say a farmer goes and starts to collect data.
Sure. So we have three sort of core means for managing privacy now. Well, two core means and then one additional sort of feature that I think is useful. So the first core mean is just an anonymization feature. So if you're an ODK build and you're creating a survey, you can anonymize any question that you want, which means that unless that person is signed in as you, or if you are submitting this information to an organization, the admin of the organization could see that, but otherwise nobody else can see the results. They can only see the question. So anonymization is a key one. And most farmers that we interact with, their perspective is, as long as you anonymize my GPS location, you anonymize my farm name and farm address if it's there, and you only provide down to the county level, they're pretty much okay with whatever. That's been our experience so far. So that's one. And then in terms of access control more broadly, we do have an organizations feature. So if you want to, so an organization is just sort of a bucket in which data can be pushed and members can be added. And what it means is if you're a member of an organization and you're pushing data to that organization, it means that the admin members of that organization will have the same access and same rights to that data that you will. So that allows, basically, it allows some rights to sort of move up within an organization. So that's the second element that we have, is a sort of organizations feature. And then finally, both in terms of, digital rights, I mean, another piece that happens is when you're out doing a survey, like you go to a farmer's market and you're collecting from random farmer X, they're not going to sign up in your app, right? Like you're having a 5-minute interaction with them, but you might be collecting useful information. Like, for example, we're collecting data about food quality and soil quality if they have a soil sample, but we're never going to see them again. So how do we get them their information back? And if we do happen to see them again, how do we keep all their information in one place? So we have a really neat feature, which we just created, which is called a share code. But basically, it means we can take any data, either at the point of collection or after it's been collected, stick somebody's email onto it, and it'll send them a link that says, hey, this data, here you have access to this data, off you go. And if they contribute more data in the future and the person who's collecting it puts their email address associated with it, that additional data will get added to that link. And what's really cool, I think, is because, again, those people are never going to sign up for the service or to the platform. If they forget or they get lost, if they come back here and they just enter in their email address, it will resend them an email with that link. And then they just click on that link and there's their data again. So that's not about privacy, but it is about data accessibility for people who aren't going to engage in your platform in the standard way.
Well, can I follow up just real quickly? I realize I've got limited time, and we can probably follow up later. But so in all three of those options, you've still basically got an admin that has access to those data, as opposed to PharmOS, where basically they're creating their own instance. So I'm not saying one is better or worse. In fact, we're trying to keep things as open as possible, but that just to understand the distinctions.
Well, I would say this: you don't have to submit as part of an organization. You can just go create your own instance and roll. Like, that's not, the organization part is not a requirement. It's just an option. But I think you're right. We don't provide individual instances in the way that PharmOS does. But I personally, I don't think that that's our role in this open community. I think that PharmOS, from a farm management perspective, fills that role really well. So it wouldn't make sense, I feel like, for us, but it's a good question.
Yeah, in comparison to PharmOS, we're more structured in a multi-tenant architecture. So we'll use like the shared service or the shared hosting, and it will serve more as a platform as a service.
Got it. Thanks.
As a user, I have the ability to, when I submit data, to either then submit it to an organization where there's actually or maybe admins, and therefore admins will have permission to view my anonymized data. However, I will also be able to contribute to no organization. In this case, my data will remain private.
I have a related question, I think. There was a study that was for more of a citizen science, whatever that might be. Is the Our.Sci platform able to show like the results of all the surveys in real time, maybe to all the contributors? Is that not also an option?
Yeah, I think you have it open there, right, Manuel? I think you already opened it because I sent it to you as a link. It's in one of your tabs, the Real Food Campaign or the Survey tab.
Just got to find it. I
If
think
not,
I closed
oh, okay.
the tab.
But yeah, we do. That's exactly right. So if you, the BFA is the Bionutrient Food Association. That survey is, this survey data is a good example. So this is all the data we collected the whole year. And in fact, actually, here, Manuel, why don't you go to the survey, the individual farmer survey. Oh, I'm sorry, dashboard. Yeah. I think it's
farmer information.
No. But this one, what that other one does is there's one that actually summarizes it in the way that you're talking about.
The planting weekly survey tracker?
No. I'll find it in a second. I'm sorry. Anonymized farm results, RFC 2018.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there you go. So the other one that we showed was like a summary overview that's publicly available of the survey results in 2018. This one is actually what we sent to the individual farmers. Now, this last year, we didn't have share codes enabled. So we actually had to download it and create a randomized code for each farm. So now if you scroll up and you choose a farm, so the farmers themselves, we gave them a randomized code. Do germ. I think there's one called germ. Has a decent amount of data. There you go. Okay, that'll work. That one works. So we would say, okay, farm, your random code is NVGYM, and they would click on this, and this is the data from their carrots that we sampled and ran in the lab.
Cool.
Yeah. So so this year, what we'll have is instead of this, we'll send them that share code, and it'll work in the same way, but it's just a much more elegant solution.
And what I find really cool about it is that they can keep their share code and come back like a couple of months later, and they'll see their data set grow. So data will be associated with their share code.
And they'll never have to sign in, which is I mean, once you get into the practical realities of working with people, especially very diverse things, scientist or non-scientist applications, it's just the login components and stuff is just a huge restriction, to be honest. So.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all, and thank you for bearing with us on the early technical glitches to get going here, and thank you, Manuel, for making it work.
Yeah, thanks, Manuel.
No worries.
We'll
Glad it worked.
If there's a lot of interest in diving deeper, we can do more sessions as we get closer. But the hope is that this gives enough of a preview as we head into the Denver event that we have a lot more questions for when we're in person. So.
Yeah, can I throw in one on the request side, just for people in the room, so they kind of know what we're looking for? Like, I think we're super interested in getting more and higher quality point-based data, like satellite information, because that's important for on the ground sort of decision making. So that we're super interested in those things. We're super interested in being able to use the platform to push to other services if that has value to people, or to pull from other services. And so those are definitely things that we're looking forward to. So
Great, and hopefully a number of you can join us at 3:30 when we dive into the PharmaOS side of things. And then we've got 2 more this Friday coming up as well. So look forward to seeing as many folks as can join those.
cool.
Thank you all. Thank you, Danielle, for recording, and we'll follow up on getting that recording posted.